Welcome, everyone, to another Jet Fuel podcast, an instant reaction podcast after the Jets' loss to the Miami Dolphins in Miami. A disappointing loss for the Jets. This one may be a bit worse than their loss last week to New England, just because, last week some fans would want to blame the refs, and I don't think we went over it. In my opinion, that's not why the Jets lost last week. They lost because of plenty of other mistakes. The refs didn't help it. I don't think it was a good call, but that was last week. This week, it's a different story. This is a Jets team that had a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter and lost it. Jets were up 28-14, ended up losing the game 31-28. So before I get started on just going through the game and discussing which players stood out or who had a good game or who had a bad game, let's just start with talking about why the Jets lost this game. The fourth quarter, how the Jets blew that 28-14 lead. So I think it all starts with the Jay Cutler injury. So early second half, it was Miami's first or second possession. It was early. It was still like 13 minutes or so in the third quarter. And Jay Cutler goes down with an injury, a chest injury. He leaves the game. He was listed as questionable to return. He does not return. So in comes Matt Moore, backup quarterback, and arguably better than Jay Cutler. This is something that we said throughout the offseason here at Jet Fuel. We had a podcast earlier over the summer, right after the Dolphins signed Jay Cutler, and we talked about if it was smart for the Dolphins to sign Cutler, if they should still start Matt Moore, how prepared would Cutler be? Remember, this is a guy who was ready to be a Fox broadcaster, and then he was given the opportunity to play with the Dolphins. So Cutler gets injured, Matt Moore comes in, and Moore does really well for Miami. 13 of 21, 188 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. The one pick was bad. It was a bad pick and a really nice play by rookie Marcus May to ball hawk and jump the route. But for the most part, Matt Moore had a lot of success against this Jets secondary and this Jets defense, namely a guy, Buster Skrine, who we'll talk plenty about on this podcast. And we got a lot of tweets from Jets fans. And first of all, just thank you all for joining, for watching, for listening, however you're hearing us. Of course, check out the rest of our content on nyjetfuel.com. We have one of our writers, Adam Zalanka, posted an article, What Went Wrong in the Jets' Loss. That is live on our website. We will have plenty of content coming, a breakdown of the collapse and a QB watch, a college quarterback watch, I should say. And I don't know if the Jets are necessarily looking at the number one pick anymore, but there's still a ton of quarterbacks. But that's enough of the plug. Let's get back to the Jets. So they lose this game, and one of the big reasons why is Buster Skrine. I reached out on Twitter, and I asked Jets fans what they thought or who they thought was responsible for the Jets losing the 28-14 lead and ultimately losing the game. And plenty of people said Buster Skrine. And I would have to agree. Skrine, probably his most egregious mistake was a penalty on a really foolish pass by Jay Cutler early in the first half. And Cutler threw off his back foot, and Marcus May and Jamal Adams were both there in coverage. And Buster Skrine bailed out Jay Cutler for what was nearly an interception, turned into about a 30-yard gain as Skrine was flagged for a defensive pass interference. So that was probably his most egregious mistake, probably his worst blunder defensively. But then the timing of his other mistakes. He had a critical penalty that extended a Miami drive on third down. These all in the second half. He allowed 2 touchdowns, the third and fourth Miami touchdowns. He was the primary defender in the area. He was flagged for a holding inside the 10-yard line. So Buster Skrine, who had a really, really good game against New England, and we talked on the Jet Fuel podcast last week, it was probably his best game. He dropped an interception, had another interception, and just played really well. Well, combated that with undoubtedly his worst game, and a big reason why the Jets' pass defense really struggled. There were a couple other culprits. Darren Lee slipped and fell on the turf, which was a huge storyline throughout the game. The field conditions in Miami were just unplayable. It was, I don't know if it warranted delaying or postponing the game. I feel like that might have been a bit excessive. It's football. Football, unlike other sports, you play in all different weather conditions. There's no rainouts like baseball. So I understand. I don't think you're going to delay the game or anything. but it was certainly just the field was in really poor condition. The Miami Hurricanes and Syracuse played a college football game there yesterday on Saturday, and the game was just in bad condition. So Darren Lee fell on the coverage, and there were a lot of defensive blunders in the secondary. Again, a lot on Buster Skrine. But I think it would be just foolish of me to leave out the offense in the fourth quarter. A lot of people, again, when I asked what went wrong for the Jets and why was Miami able to come back, you point to the Jets offense being completely stagnant. You saw it kind of piece together after Miami. So the Jets went up by 14, 28-14. And it's the beginning of the fourth quarter, and you start to say, and I know I said this, I was tweeting from the Jet Fuel Twitter account at New York Jet Fuel, and I said, this Miami offense is not good. A 14-point lead might be enough. And for the first three quarters, it looked like a 14-point lead would be enough. Miami went right down the field on the first drive of the game, and after that was really ineffective. The running game, I mean, credit to the Jets' defensive line, and Muhammad Wilkerson played his best game. The Jets shut down Jay Ajayi for the second straight time. And the defensive front was good through the bulk of the first three quarters. So going into the fourth with the Jets up 14, you think, all right, it's going to take a lot for the Jets to lose this game. And not only did the Jets defense disappoint and allow those points and Miami to come back, but it was the offense. Miami scored, making it 28-21, and instantly the Jets had a 3-and-out. And actually almost fumbled the ball. Bilal Powell, his knee was barely down. They overturned that call. But the Jets offense, you could kind of tell. The play calling was a bit more conservative. The offense was not moving with any sort of rhythm like it was in the first three quarters. And that's a big reason for the Jets' loss too. Because while the defense gave up the lead, the offense didn't add any insurance, didn't pad the lead, didn't even chew out some clock and make Miami burn some timeouts. The offense, quick drives. The Jets had one first down in the fourth quarter. It was just a really, really bad performance. And then, of course, how can you talk about the offense without talking about the Josh McCown interception? It was 40-something seconds left, or it was 57 seconds left, I believe, when the Jets got the ball back. A couple seconds trickled off, and eventually, with around 40 to 50 seconds, Josh McCown threw an interception. It was by far his worst mistake as a Jet. He had been having probably his best game as a Jet. He had looked really good. The first half, his touchdown pass to Jermaine Kearse was on the money. He had a couple of wide open touchdowns. Austin Seferian-Jenkins had the third Jets touchdown, and he had a QB sneak. So he accounted for all four Jets touchdowns, and Josh McCown had one of his better games. And then the interception was just a bad throw. And you have to question, if you're the Jets, the aggressiveness from Todd Bowles after being so conservative through the whole fourth quarter, why he opted to throw the ball and try to play for the win as opposed to overtime. Now, I personally, this is just me speaking, I don't fault him. I think the Jets needed to go for it. They had all three timeouts. They had 40-something seconds. They had a chance to score and take the lead and possibly win the game in regulation. I don't fault Bowles for the decision, for trying to go for it. I think the play calling was it was a tricky play, and McCown, it was just a bad throw, and that cost him. So, I mean, I do want to give you guys, the fans, and some of our Twitter responses some love on the air. So I'm going to go through right now. Let's see. So I tweeted out, who's to blame for the Jets collapse? Let us know, and we'll break it down on an Instant Jet Fuel podcast. That's exactly what we are doing. So let's start. Let's go all the way down. Let's start at Super Gish. What a shame. Maybe now we can get back on track. Robbie Anderson is still once again a moron. Well, I think Robbie Anderson, that he did have a bad penalty late in the fourth quarter. I don't think Robbie Anderson is a culprit for this loss, though. He had a touchdown catch. He's not a number one wide receiver. The Jets going out and getting Jermaine Kearse really helped Robbie Anderson, who's not a number one. Maybe he can be a serviceable number two, but he's not a number one. But I don't think you can blame him for this loss. Next one from Jets Fan for Life. Penalties, discipline, and coaching. That's very fair. We talked about Buster Skrine's penalties. We talked about, I said Robbie Anderson had a penalty, but this was just a sloppy game for the Jets. And again, we've talked all season. the Jets don't have talent. We know that. And I shouldn't say they don't have talent. They have some talented players, but they're not as talented as a playoff team per se. You know the Jets don't have that talent. So when you don't have the talent, you have to make up for it with, first of all, passion and determination and aggressiveness, which we have seen the Jets play so far. I think we can all say the Jets come out looking determined every single week. I think they play hard, and that's a very positive sign. That's what makes this team, for a lot of people, easy to root for and an exciting team to watch, despite not having a lot of talent. But at the same time, where you get that sense of aggression and passion and fighting for every yard, you also need to be smart with that. And we talk about how the Jets have just barely any margin for error, if any at all. And in this game, the Dolphins almost matched the Jets. So Miami had 9 penalties for 76 yards, and still the Jets 12 penalties for 124 yards. That can't happen. That just can't happen. Most NFL teams don't win a game if you put up those penalty numbers. You definitely don't win a game if you're a team like the New York Jets who doesn't have the talent to overcome those penalties. So Josh McCown taking the podium, and of course, after I wrap up this brief post-game breakdown, I will go back. We are going to watch the post-game press conference for Todd Bowles, for Josh McCown, and for some of the other players that the Jets make available to the media. And we will have more content on nyjetfuel.com. But Josh McCown said that he made a bad read on the interception and had a sick feeling. I mean, he had a really good game, and you have to fault him for that. I mean, there's no other way around it. The game was going into overtime if it wasn't for that play. It's not his fault that the Jets lost, because giving up a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter, but that was it was a really bad interception. There's no other way around it. Some of the other people who we always thank you for interacting with us on Twitter. We always see you guys. Shout out you guys, and you're awesome. So some of the other people, someone by the name of Devin Rose, penalties in McCown. Observe Man 24, penalties and fourth quarter offense. Again, 1 first down in the fourth quarter. That's not going to happen. New Frank City FC, screen conservative play calling, stupid penalties. Jesse agreed, Todd Bowles going ultra conservative. So, and a couple more, Josh McCown, Buster Screen and Josh McCown. Poor defensive execution from Jordan. So you see a lot of similar themes and a lot of the things we've touched on. Play calling being a little too conservative, the offense not moving with any efficiency in the fourth quarter, and the Jets giving up a 14-point lead. Not a recipe for success. So real quickly, before we do wrap up this brief edition of the Jet Fuel Podcast and Instant Reaction, I just wanted to touch on a couple other things I noticed throughout the game. Muhammad Wilkerson actually played his best game. It was his birthday. He recorded his second career interception, a nice birthday gift. Had a couple pressures on either Matt Moore or Jay Cutler throughout the game. He played undoubtedly his best game. I think it was a fine game. I don't think he was a superstar. I think you would like to see him get a sack, but at the same time, sacks don't tell everything. The fact that he was able to get pressures and he had a nice interception, he made a really good chase down tackle, a nice hustle play, which is something we haven't seen from Mo throughout the year. A really nice response from Mo Wilkerson. Again, still didn't record a sack, but it's encouraging for the Jets that at least Mo Wilkerson was able to get in the backfield. The running game, I thought Bilal Powell looked sharp coming back from a calf injury. Did not look like he had any sort of ailment. I thought he was good. Again, I thought Josh McCown was good all the way up until that fourth quarter. I thought Jamal Adams played a solid game. Again, he had some mistakes. We will see that throughout the year, the growing pain. But Jamal Adams, he tipped the pass that Wilkerson ended up picking. He had a sack, one that Leonard Williams nearly had, but Matt Moore eluded Williams. So I thought those were a couple guys who had, and of course, how can I not mention Lachlan Edwards? I mean, this guy he's been, and I mentioned it on Twitter, the unsung hero of this 2017 Jets team. I mean, pinned the Dolphins down inside the 5, and that caused the interception by Wilkerson, which set up the 1-yard sneak from Josh McCown. So, I mean, those are a couple of guys who played well. We've talked about the culprits, Screen, McCown, the play calling from Bowles or being too conservative. The offensive line, I don't think, was great. Brandon Shell left early in the first quarter with a neck injury, did not return. Brent Quale took over. The offensive line just as a whole was not great. I think the secondary was bad, namely Buster Skrine. I thought Darren Lee had his moments. I think he made a couple of nice reads and a couple of nice plays, but then resulted in penalties. He would have had a sack, but there was a roughing the passer. He would have had a nice tackle near the sideline on an outside run, but was called for a very blatant face mask. Again, some positives masked by some negatives for Darren Lee, who seemed to maybe have been turning a corner, so it might have been a bit discouraging to see him have those penalties. And then, yeah, I mean, just looking forward for the Jets next week, it does not get any easier for New York. So this is a team, and I'm going to pull up the schedule right now. Now at 3-4, this game against Miami was arguably the Jets' last winnable game in a while, because you look forward, next week, New York comes back home, but they host Atlanta. Atlanta Falcons, they were in the Super Bowl last year. Then next week, short week at home versus the Buffalo Bills. The only thing that helps the Jets there is that it's at home. You see these Thursday night games. It helps if you're the home team, short rest, and if you don't have a travel day, that helps. But then after that, at Tampa Bay, again, that's a team that competed with the Bills. Their record does not indicate that team. Jameis Winston has struggled. I think that is a decent enough team to where they'll give the Jets some problems. And then the bye week, and then Panthers, Chiefs, Broncos, Saints, Chargers, Patriots to wrap up the season. We talked before the season, post-bye week could be the toughest stretch of the Jets season. And the hot start for the Jets, the couple straight wins against the mediocre opponents, the Browns and the Dolphins in that first week. If the Jets really were trying to make a playoff push and a wild card push in a very wide open AFC, they needed to win this game, and they were not able to do that. So thank you for tuning in to this quick reaction, rapid fire New York Jets breakdown. For New York Jet Fuel, I'm Max Marcello. Make sure to check out the website, www.nyjetfuel.com, our Twitter at New York Jet Fuel. We'll have content for you throughout the week and throughout the rest of the season. We got you guys covered on all things New York Jets. Thank you for tuning in to the Jet Fuel Podcast.